This video is sponsored by Let Bygones Be Bygones, the atmospheric future noir thriller launching on April 30th. Channel your inner Blade Runner and solve one last case in this stylish, choice-driven RPG. Create a unique story as you forge your own path through the dystopian city planet Terra Hive. Will you use logic to deduce the facts? Connect with people on an emotional level, or just pull out your gun and cause a bit of chaos. There are no wrong choices here, only the consequences of your actions. Just like that time you watched Finding Nemo and decided that it would be a great idea to put a saltwater fish tank in your studio apartment. Now you're not getting your deposit or that axolotl back. Let Bygones Be Bygones launches on April 30th, so head on over to the Steam page to wishlist the game and get your hands on the demo now.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Windbreaker podcast. I'm Yahtzee Crucial. I'm joined by Frost, as usual.
Hello.
Also by slightly less usually, Jack. And downright never happened before at all, we're joined by Ross Scott from Accursed Farms. How you doing, Ross?
Whoa. Thanks. Been busy.
Yeah, we've heard about it because we have literally brought you on to talk about how busy you've been lately. So why don't we start by me just letting you pitch to the floor the Stop Killing Games campaign, where it is, and what people can do to help.
Sure. Okay. This is a movement I've launched to stop or challenge the legality of publishers completely destroying a game that you paid for. So, you buy a game that has like an online only requirement, then usually a few years later, they just shut it down and you're left with absolutely nothing and no way to fix it or anything. That has not been tested under the law in many countries globally. That's exactly what I'm doing. Kind of doing it two ways. One is there's a game that's been kind of an ideal candidate to test this called The Crew. There's a driving game released by Ubisoft. So if anyone owns that, you can help. And the other way is in several countries, the UK, Australia, hopefully soon Canada, and later on, the European Union itself, will have direct government petitions where if they get enough signatures, people have to respond people in government have to respond on this issue to clarify, well, hey, is this legal? Is there a question worth asking? So I have a website I've set up to this at stopkillinggames.com. So.
All right, and you can anyone can go to that, and there's just like simple instructions for wherever you live, what you can do to help, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, Americans are much more limited. It's sort of somebody compared this to feeling like they were like in foreign occupied territory for what they could do on this. So, however, if you own the game, The Crew, it's just a coincidence that this game can act on it, but it's much better in Europe, Australia, to some extent Canada, and the UK, maybe Brazil later on. That's still up in the air for Brazil.
So any latest updates from the campaign?
Oh, man, there's a bunch. Well, yeah, okay, the UK petition is open. Also, the Australian one. The Australian one has the tightest deadline, May 20th. Although it kind of backfired. There was a miscommunication, and now the issue is for not just video games, but all software, which is probably too big an issue and will get way more resistance. However, it seems like we can narrow it down back in time. If the petition is successful, we can narrow it down back in time before it gets into Parliament, back to video games. Right. So, other news, two members of European Parliament have taken an interest in this. One is Patrick Breyer. He's unfortunately on his way out. But another one, oh man, I'm going to butcher his name, Nicholas Ninas. He's taken it up, and I actually don't even want to say what he's doing because to tip off the industry, but I'm encouraged, and it'll help get answers. However this goes, whether it's successful or not, we're going to get clear answers from probably at least half a dozen major countries on this as to, is this legal? To just...
That's great, yeah.
Yeah.
I know this is like a drum you've been banging for quite a few years now, isn't it? I want to say, was it your Darkspawn game dungeon, or was it before that?
Battle Forge was probably the first one I did. But yeah, I did one on Darkspore also. Yeah.
Sure, and for viewers who don't know, Ross, you have been a long time content creator, YouTuber, from what did we decide on over 10 years ago? You started Freeman's Mind.
Yeah, 2007. That would
something like
be
that.
like 16 years ago.
So you started a series called Freeman's Mind, in which you gave Freeman from Half-Life kind of an internal dialogue while going through the game. My current favorite series of mine is your Game Dungeon, in which you delve into old and forgotten, abandoned, a lot of times, games, and kind of talk us, the audience, through the process of not only how the game works, but how you get the game to play, which is always fascinating, by the way. And so for me, it's like, obviously you have a love of old games, of abandoned games. Why The Crew is the question.
Oh, well, I mean, I don't just talk about old and abandoned ones, but I talk about any that I think might make a good video to watch. And that can often be odd, weird ones off the beaten path. But sometimes
I've been watching I've been watching Game Dungeon since the beginning, and one thing that I've always loved about it is that you clearly don't pick your subject matter based on what the algorithm would favor at any given moment.
No, I don't. It's just
there's so many games. I like to think I know a lot of games, but there's so many I'd never heard of before until I saw your video about it. Because clearly you only pick the stuff that you have a personal investment in, let's say.
Not always. Some just sort of pop up and they give me all sorts of thoughts on it. And unfortunately, you just made me forget what Jack's question was.
Oh, well, I specifically, as someone like yourself who plays so many, older games, possibly games with these same
why The Crew?
Why The Crew? Yeah.
Okay, well, The Crew, it's just kind of why I'm choosing it for this campaign? Or okay, well, that's easier. It's because it checks off a lot of boxes. We've been able to act on this. The biggest box it checks off is that this was released by Ubisoft, and Ubisoft is located in France. And France and the European Union in general have way more consumer protection laws than places like the United States, or I guess to a lesser extent, the UK or maybe Canada. So if I was going to pick one venue where to have this battle, it would be in France. So that's a lucky coincidence. The other is it was a big enough game to get a lot of people able to file complaints on this, because I don't know what the numbers are, but it had at least 12 million players, probably more. I've heard somebody say 16, but I haven't seen that verified. So that's not the biggest game ever, but that's enough that you can still find people who have receipts of it, or or just some proof of ownership, like a screenshot of that in their account, and that's because I'm only going to reach a small minority of people, but if that small minority is enough to kind of flood consumer protection agencies saying, hey, is this legal? Are they allowed to do this? Then I can kind of hit that critical mass.
Yeah.
And it also helps that this is kind of a generic car game as opposed to something like Manhunt or something where it could easily get kind of derailed and smeared left and right.
No, quite.
And the other reason is this is what I would call a clean kill. No one on Earth can run this game at the moment. So whereas I heard with Destiny 2, they sold DLC, but then that doesn't work anymore, or else they remove most of it. Good luck explaining that to a government official, like what DLC is, or just the multiplayer shutting down to a game, where that makes this all a lot messier. So having this just be, 100% of people who bought it cannot play it. Government officials can understand that, that helps a lot.
You've taken a great hard line on this. Stop killing games. We can all understand that. Because in many ways, I think a lot of people just didn't realize they could do anything about it up until now, It just seems to be something we've just sort of learned to live with.
Well, I never learned that. It always bothered me. But for the United States, they might be right, unfortunately. However, if we do have a major victory, like in France or Germany or Australia, that would probably change. The Americans would get the benefits downstream from that, because that would probably change the industry in that in order to sell games in the future in that region, they would need to have some sort of end of life plan when they shut it down. And if they've already done the work creating that, they may as well make it global. The analogy I make to that is in 2014, the Australian Consumer Commission sued Valve over not being able to have refunds on your game, because you used to not be able to get refunds on Steam. And Valve lost, and now that's global policy for Steam. So I imagine it would be a very similar dynamic.
Yeah, it's simpler for that sort of thing to enact a policy everywhere than just in one country. And I don't think there's anyone who would try to argue that it wouldn't be a good idea to be able to have refunds on Steam, because I think, if nothing else, you could at least pin them down and get them to answer the question on camera. Like, is this the intention? Are you intentionally trying to screw people over here?
Well, the answer is obviously yes, but the question is that legal? That's the part. That's the part that's a big gray area.
Absolutely. And so, like in this time, you found the crew.
I apologize. I had to reset the Discord because Ross' webcam is getting like delays.
Oh, okay.
You will see like this going like blank for a second, and it should fix. Basically, changing the server.
Resetting the server. No problem. Thank you, Eric.
3, 2, 1. There we go. That should fix the issue. Sorry about that.
Oh, okay. Oh, it looks good now, is what I saw. That was the first comment. So, boom. You're a magician. So
I was thinking of us doing like the Wayne's World on the screen.
Absolutely. Thank you, Eric. So my question, Ross, was how were you waiting for all of these boxes to be checked, and the crew happened to check all these boxes? Were you actively searching it out, or did it fall in your lap a little bit?
It kind of fell in my lap. I was getting pessimistic. I mean, I was still going to do something, but nowhere near on this scale, because the options wouldn't have been there. And in fact, I was considering this. I kind of dropped the ball. I realized in retrospect, I maybe could have done this for Overwatch, but it might have been a blessing in disguise that I didn't, because they're not located in France, and I think their European outlet is in Switzerland, which is outside the EU, even though it shares some economic laws with that. So now it's all getting muddy again. So but that had 50. I've never even played Overwatch, but that had 50 million copies sold. So that would have been great in that respect. I would have done this for any game that checked the boxes. It's just that Ubisoft set themselves up as a target, so it's like, oh right, take the shot. So
almost feels like they got complacent. For the longest time, this sort of thing was always in the background of stuff. Like games constantly coming out, old games that hardly anyone played were constantly dying because they couldn't maintain the live services. A lot of games that they stopped supporting, people still played because they had like set up their own servers and they'd modded the game to run them. But now they really have it's gotten to the point where something needed to be done. Like they were gradually edging, as they always do, towards more and more bullshit. And something had to give, I suppose.
And it's been years, because you've been running Dead Game News for quite a while. You even made a video, I think 5 years ago, saying games as a service is essentially just a scam in its own right. Did you think it'd get this far?
No, but I hadn't really envisioned how so much of this is in a fog. To know what's going on with it. I had a thought and I lost it, so keep going. Yeah.
As it goes. Yeah, no, leading on from that, I suppose. Let's say that we do, they just say, "Is this legal?" And they go, "Yeah, it's legal to do this." Do you see it getting worse? Like Tarkov very recently has been sort of fudging with the word DLC, how it's screwed out its it's older players who accepted a sort of founder status are not going to get new free DLC because the new stuff isn't DLC. Do you expect more fudging of words? How crooked do you think it gets? And at what point do you think you're just like, you know what? I'm going to take up woodworking, you know, something I can keep and hold.
I think okay, I'm biased, but I think if I hadn't stepped in on this, it was going to get worse and worse because I wasn't seeing any like substantive pushback on this. It was, and I feel lucky I was able to find the angles that I was. So, and again, even if they say, like, yes, this is all legal, well, the odds are dicier, but that's what the petitions are for. It's like, okay, if this is legal, how about we make this illegal then? Like, you know, with tons of signatures on this. But and I remember what I was going to say. Yeah, I think Ubisoft got reckless because they're treating the entire world the way the industry treats the United States. And they forgot that, like, oh, wait, there are laws in other countries, maybe, you know. But yeah, for Tarkov, I'm not even sure of all the details, but I've heard some about that, and it was hilarious. There was an article on PC Gamer where they framed it as saying that like they've caved and they'll let the players like play the game that they paid for. And I was thinking, yeah, that really shows where the industry's mind is on this. Like, okay, fine, we'll compromise and let you play the game you paid money for. Like, it's like. Yeah, I mean, I guess technically.
I'm saying I'm a good family man. I've never beaten my wife or my kids. It's like, no, that's below the baseline.
You get the best dad in the world mug for that. There you go. Never.
Yeah, I mean, technically, if they had just taken your money and not given you a game, then like, yeah, I guess that would not be a compromise. That'd be more on the publisher's side.
Love that.
I remember what I said once when Ubisoft was trying to sell time saver like bonuses that were basically framed as buy this and then you don't have to play so much as the game. And I remember saying, can we just like pay you twice as much money up front and then just not get the game at all?
They heard you. Like, look what's happening now. Now
Right. If you pay enough money, you can still get all the achievements for beating the game, but you don't actually have to play it. That's all I want.
Oh no. Just for the Steam achievement. That's all I want there.
That's what I don't get. I mean, what are people in games for if not just to play the games rather than just get the name on the high score table? I suppose. I guess the sorry, you were saying.
Yeah, sorry to lag. I don't mean. I was gonna say. I'm not even trying to approach the quality side of things. I figure that's I'll never win that, but or at least millions of other people can talk about that. I don't have to lead the show. I'm just trying to get the standard. Don't destroy the game in all forms that people pay money for.
Yeah. So, just to clarify, what would be your ideal world in terms of what game publishers would have to do going forwards? Because you don't want to force them to have to run the games forever, right?
100%. I think that's unreasonable.
Yeah.
I think they should be allowed to end support whenever they want. Besides, minimum legal standards. No, the ideal scenario would be the dream scenario will be they not only patch it so that you can run it either with private hosting or an offline mode if that's appropriate for the game, but to also think, okay, we're done with this game. We're not going to touch it again. We made all our money. Fine, here's source code or documentation. Do whatever you want. We're done with this game. Now, I'm not trying for that far. I'm trying to get something, again, ideally be patching it. Like, actually, the example I keep bringing up is Gran Turismo Sport was another always online game that was a driving game that you needed the connection for, I think, up to 7 years, but then they patched everything. Now they've washed their hands of it, but you can play the game. So that should be the industry standard. And then if they wanted to go above and beyond that, release code or tools or stuff to let the community do whatever they want.
Well, Ross, if we've learned anything, you need to ask for way more and then compromise, just like they compromise by letting you play
We have done that. in our petitions, we're not asking for repair instructions or help. However, we're willing to compromise on that. We're asking, no, you sold the game. It needs to be in a playable state.
Yeah.
And we kept that language kind of broad because, okay, fine, maybe every last feature doesn't work, like an auction house or some matchmaking or private messaging between some extra stuff that's kind of on top of the. So by keeping broad language of a playable state, that hopefully covers things.
Absolutely.
So, ideal scenario for me would be if there'd be something you have to sign and say, we're abandoning the game, and then the source code is just put in like an online library forever.
Yeah.
Treated like the National Library does books.
There can be to play devil's advocate, there can be issues with that, especially if you have a newer game that uses like the exact same engine. If all the source code's out there, then there's going to be 100 exploits coming for that new game. But at the same time, the farther off in the future this is that this requirement's coming, the more the industry can adapt to. This is not an unsolvable problem. And again, to be clear, the source code thing, we're not demanding that. We're just playable in some form, so.
I think part of the problem is that the video games technology isn't as standardized as some forms of expression. I mean, games have always died. In the olden days, it used to be just because consoles didn't have backwards compatibility, or that we just couldn't run ancient DOS games on the newest versions of Windows.
Well, see, those games never really died. It's just they became a lot harder to run and wouldn't work on the newest thing. I mean, if you still had that old DOS or Windows 95 computer and kept them mothballed, it should still work for online multiplayer stuff back then. So, I mean, that's kind of a different issue with preservation that I have more confidence in kind of the community to solve, but.
Oh, sure, but like that, there's a huge difference in art preservation when so much technology is involved. Like we know how to restore a painting. We got that locked down. But when operating system, game engines that are tied to the frame rate of your operating system, which of course will be very slow forever. When a piece of art has so many moving parts to it, preservation is ridiculously difficult.
Yeah, we've gotten lucky. There has been as much emulation or documentation as there is.
Yeah.
I remember seeing an article a while back where they compared the modern state of software as a whole. They were saying that it's almost like this isn't really a parallel to like the Industrial Revolution where we could mass produce stuff. It's more like cottage industries where everybody had their own style of like making shoes or a basket. Well, there weren't these kind of universal standards across things. That's probably still the case in a lot of ways, It's the problem is to solve what you're talking about. You would have to solve copyright, and boy, I do not want to try that battle. I mean, I think I've heard like, especially when you have like the likes of Disney trying to push it as far as possible. Like, I think the standard for copyright in the United States is the lifetime of the author plus 70 years before it enters public domain. It's like, I don't want that fight.
Yeah, don't mess with the mouse, as they say.
Absolutely. Even the entire state of Florida is losing against Disney, so we don't stand a chance.
So it's not so much preservation games as a whole topic as just forcing publishers to not actively kill the games, like going out of their way to prevent people from emulating or patching the game to be able to still run it.
That they paid money for.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, if nothing else, if we could just get them to say that yes, we want to do this, we could all go, okay, just so we're clear, we live in an evil cyberpunk future. Great. We've figured that out. Let's all stick like weird visors on our faces and turn into the Borg.
Well, they get the governments to say that. I mean, of course, the publishers are saying that right now. You don't own this. Yeah. And like, it's because we put this clause in here, even though almost no other good acts this way, and it's not defined by law, because they're typically selling you the game as a good, but then it relies on an external service to function, and you're giving no terms as to how long that service lasts. So it's less than renting even, because if you rent something, you know when you have to return it or when it expires, you know? You're not even getting that. But
Imagine that world though. Like, what was that mobile game? Live, Love, or whatever, where they said, "Hey, the game's releasing, and then it's going to be down within the year," or whatever it was.
Yeah,
They announced their
famously
own end date.
they announced the release date and that it was shutting down in the same tweet, famously.
Which I'm like, you know what? I just want that sort of transparency. I'm not of the mind, not to speak of the Debbie Downer. I'm not of the mind that we can change everything, but at the very least, some changes are necessary. And to me, that would be like the transparency, where you can just look at the cover of the game. As you said, they're putting these sort of like live service games that can come down with alongside the single player games. There is almost like no way to differentiate between any of these.
Well, yeah, it's like
yeah.
almost like we need two different like channels for those things, for the games that, as people like you and I understand them, they're like the single player story narrative based, the work of art, the culturally important thing from which we can still learn, and just the alternative interpretation of a game being just a thing you do with your hands when you're bored, like a live service grindy emotion numbing thing. I think a lot of people who have the idea that that's what games are feel like, you know, any live service is as good as another.
yeah, but I mean, I look at it from the perspective where these games are very subjective, what people are enjoying from them. So, you know, somebody's going to see a game and think that's trash. Another person's going to be amazed by the world that they create and like, oh, this music's great. And they're, even if they're not really engaging with the game on the level that maybe it was even designed for. So just to destroy everything, it just, like, I can't turn that off in my brain, how it bothers me. So.
Agreed. Let's not judge other people's art. It's all art, whether you enjoy it or not is up for debate. Absolutely.
Well, as you're fond of saying, Jack, video games might or may not be art, but they certainly contain art. And it's the destruction of like the work of individual artists, like they're part of these huge development teams, like the musicians, the texture artists, the character artists. I mean that all sort of adds an extra complication if we want to talk about releasing source code after a while, because intellectual property, who owns what? Is it just like get redistributed back, like you realized you forgot your wallet and have to put everything back in the grocery store?
Just leave it there. It's in the car. I'll never come back.
Yeah,
like you guys do.
The raccoons will get it. It'll all get sorted out somehow.
That's why I think it's great that he's not going for copyright. Instead, it's just more so like during the Steam refund era, it was Total Biscuit that was more so citing like mercantilism. This is how marketing used to work. There is nothing that exists in the way video games do now, where it's like, hey, you are purchasing this thing that could last you forever, or it could be gone next week, and you have no way of accessing it at all.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was thinking,
I like that old school style. I prefer that instead of the like, don't you understand? This is art. Like, I think it's more so like, don't you understand? I paid for this thing, and now it's gone.
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, I'm doing this because it's the same to me as if somebody was setting fire to a painting or destroying every copy of an album or something like that. But that's not the primary route I'm pursuing this legally. It's the consumer angle, which, like, hey, this also probably violates laws too. So let's go with the stuff that's going to be most effective. That's the means to the end. And yeah, you were talking about the old mercantilism. I was thinking you probably have to go back to feudal times to have some equivalent to this, where like the serfs lived on the land, but the lord owns the land. He owns everything on there, and you're just existing at his pleasure, you know, to live there. Or if they wanted to send guards into your house and just take things, they could. I mean, like it's just that they usually chose not to because they don't want the peasants revolting. But you know, I was thinking that's about the level of rights we're talking about here, because it just goes against just basic commerce on any definition. I think it's trying to invent something new.
I read somewhere that medieval serfs actually work less than most people do in like 8 to 5 jobs these days, because you know you work on a farm, you plant everything, you feed the animals, You got the afternoon free. Put your feet up. Hang out with the fellow serfs in the pub.
Oh, that's just farmers.
Well, no, I've heard that. Well, yeah, you'd have to work real hard during harvest, but then the rest of the year, I think I heard something like the UK or England had something like a third of the days were essentially holidays or festivals or something back in feudal times. And for France, it might have even been close to half, or maybe I'm getting the numbers wrong, but it was very high. You know, I mean, so.
Oh, sure. I think like at the end of the day, what's happening in a lot of industries is companies and corporations are getting further and further away from the simple product transaction. And that's what we used to have is, oh, I buy a thing, I get to use the thing, right? And as they get into monthly subscriptions, as they get into games as a service, they're seeing a broader definition of what a product is until the product is no longer part of their income. So they don't worry about it at all.
I don't know. They just find newer ways to sort of sell you the same carrot over and over again, right?
Well, yeah, it's always been Nintendo's pattern, hasn't it? They just like resell their old stuff for every new console.
Yeah, but they keep the old stuff too, you know.
That's the thing. It's like, you know, with something like The Crew, with something like games as a service, they're no longer selling you the product of a fun game to play. They are selling you the experience of weeks and months and years of giving them a little bit of money in order to do the thing that you actually want to do, which is just play the dang game.
Yeah, like Star Wars Battlefront 2. I'm actually amazed that they didn't take down the old one because it serves as a comparison point for the new one. And it's like, this is trash, like hardly any better. So that's why, I mean, whenever they take down these sort of games, I almost half anticipate it's like, hey, a big announcement shutdown for this one game. Why? Because we're about to make a live service version of it. We don't want you to have the old one.
Was Battlefront 2 EA?
Yes.
No, the first one was Lucas Arts.
No, the publisher.
Yes.
Okay, well, I think there's a company culture difference among different companies. I think Electronic Arts, they just don't care. They don't care when the game goes down. They don't care if people bring it back up. You talk about your spreads, they didn't take it out. They don't care. That's in the past. Everything about their behavior has seemed consistent to me on that. Whereas others might have what you're talking about where, hey, we have a new game in the franchise. Let's kill the old one. I think that's a more recent development. I think most of this has come from just negligence where, well, we didn't put any thought towards what happens when we shut it down. There's no penalty for doing it, so okay, fine, we'll just shut it down. We're done. And I think that's the case with most of them. However, more recently there might be that mentality of, well, hey, if you're playing the old game, you're not buying the new one, so you know.
Well, this is why this sort of thing needs to be like carved out in legislature, because the corporation is flat out designed to just do the thing that makes it the most money, with human decision making subtracted from that. And that's what happened.
It's not even clear to me that it would make it more money necessarily, because the old game could serve as advertising if it's a franchise, you know, having, hey, it's old Star Wars, or here, have you seen the new Star Wars that we're putting all our marketing stuff on, you know? And plus, the people who are playing old games, it's got to be a minority of players at any given time for any game versus the big, new, exciting game that has marketing everywhere and has YouTube channels talking about it. And I imagine that's where the majority of players are going. So,
see, I think that depends because like Overwatch 1 being so like recent, the gap between them being so minor, and our tech isn't really like the graphical improvements are, you know, they're diminishing, the technical improvements are diminishing. So it is your own competitor. Right. I don't think Overwatch 1 and 2 can exist because now you've essentially just split your own player base. It's almost like they're thinking ahead of this sense of like, we do want to monopolize our own player base instead of having them split amongst all these other games. So let's start now getting into the habit of it. That way, 4 or 5 years down the line, we've already set precedent in that sort of like, you guys don't like this? What? You didn't say anything 4 years ago when we did it. Why are you now crying about it?
That's a very good counterpoint. Yeah, you're right. Overwatch.
That's why I'm very like jump on it immediately as soon as you see the behavior, because otherwise you'll go to court and the judge will go, you were fined for 7 years and now you're crying? Why? That's just really hard
I,
to do.
I would have done this 10 years ago if I thought I could. I mean, it's that's actually, I have gotten this sense just from feedback and everything that the window is sort of slowly closing to be able to act on this. So I'm very glad we've been able to hit as hard as we can. That like, oh, well, there was nothing, you didn't say anything then. I'm not even sure what the first game shutdown that was sold as a one-time purchase was. It might have been Battleforge, actually, because there were MMOs before that died off, but those are usually, you know, subscription-based, where that's a lot harder to argue legally because, okay, you paid the game for 30 days or a year, the year's up, okay, now we're shutting it down, and if you had extra, we're refunding that amount of money. It's like, well, that's a normal service. That's harder to argue from a legal perspective. But it might have been Battleforge, though I'm not sure. There could have been one prior to that. So unfortunately, you have to wait until the game's dead to really act on it, and then it varies. But
you gotta wait for the issue. I feel like it's just kind of the water's slowly been boiling. We went from a consumer standpoint, only so few games offered your older versions, like Minecraft. If you don't like any of the updates, you can just pick any of the older ones. Terraria, you can just roll it back to one of the older ones. But so far, we've sort of accepted this culture of like, whatever patch comes through, that's just what I have now. Like, I'm okay with it because no one's really complained about that. And to the point where now it's like, okay, you now do not have the old one. And it's incredibly different from what it used to be. I think we kind of let it happen because for the most part it was advantageous. Like No Man's Sky, is anyone really going to argue for their original copy of No Man's Sky? I don't think so. Or like Cyberpunk, no one's going to argue like, hey man, they took away my old version. No one cares. Well, but now it's like, you're taking away my junk.
That's where it got fudgy in recent years, isn't it? I mean, as you say, no one wants the original version of No Man's Sky, but where's the line? Where's the line between just updating the game, adding new content, like what Eric Barone does with Stardew Valley on a regular basis, and changing the game so it's not like the product you had? I mean, would Blizzard have gotten away with Overwatch 2 if they'd not called it Overwatch 2, if they just patched Overwatch 1 into Overwatch 2?
You're probably thinking ahead of the curve there.
I don't know.
That's probably next. Yeah.
I asked them for, I think that's why they made Overwatch 2 is like, damn, this should have been live service instead of subscription based.
Yeah,
or not even subscription, one-time purchase.
Once we've gotten them to stop killing games, I think the next thing on my priority list is we need to have a date where we just say we stop updating this game. Where we stop adding stuff to it, we stop changing it, it's just what it is forever. And we can move on to the next bloody thing.
But you're going to get, people upset. Like with Dead Cells, they had promised DLC for like another 4 years. And then they were like, you know what? This is the last one. Right. So now it's just a constant, you kind of do have to constantly sort of meet them at their words instead of waiting for the bad thing to happen. Right. It feels like a very toxic relationship where it's like, you got to be willing to speak up at every angle before I was like, well, the game's dead. How did we end up here? I say though, before we get into super chats though, you've had a lot of great support. Have you had any pushback? I saw in your update video, or it was the stream.
That's what I was meaning to ask. I mean, I don't think anyone I think the corporations are obviously against you, but I was wondering how much pushback and excusing there is from the user base.
Oh, not just that. No, he's got stories of like maybe a little corporate espionage going on.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. There has been some, not a lot though. I imagine it's like a single-digit percentage of people that are against this. The people who are against this tend to be in a few camps. One is because I'm trying to go through government means, they're against it. It's like, no, you shouldn't use the government for this. They'll make it all worse. And I've tried to explain, from my perspective, this doesn't get any worse than the trajectory we're on. It's like, okay, a game you like gets destroyed and you can never play it again that you paid for. How does gaming get worse than that? I mean, I'm sure people can think of something, but it's a challenge. Another camp is, I think people just don't understand that this is possible. Like, they've been so used to the this is how it works for multiplayer, that they're not, or online games, that they don't realize it can work different ways. Like I think, the Unreal Tournament games got delisted last year. And most of those you can still play online, even though the server's been shut down with other people. And even things like MMOs, when server emulators enter the wild, I think there are cases where I think for an illicit World of Warcraft emulator, it can host thousands of people, from what I understand, just from like home systems. So this is definitely possible. Or even if it was a big MMO that required specialized hardware, okay, well maybe you can scale it down. You know that, okay, we can't host 10,000 people, but we can host 50 or something, and that could be a world of difference for the people who still want to play it. You know,
Absolutely.
I'm trying to think of. I know there were a few other camps, but those are the big ones. But yeah, for the espionage thing, this is kind of unconfirmed, but some people in a sort of fan-made Discord for my regular videos reported somebody had come in there and they were acting kind of suspiciously, and they were able to find their contact details from the Discord, I think, and look them up on their LinkedIn profile. And that person worked for a PR firm that had represented Ubisoft in the past. So the idea, and apparently they were looking around the Reddit too, the unofficial, Cursed Farms Reddit, doing the same thing. So that makes me think that, hey, maybe we're having an impact then if we're having kind of, I think the leading theory is they were trying to find something, that they could smear me on or smear the movement on, to say like, oh, look at all these horrible people, and come up with quotes or something. But the joke's on them, since I barely used Discord even before this campaign, I guess. But as for other industry pushback, oh yeah, there was a what I would call kind of a smear article in like a French and German paper, though I think the paper itself was, or I say paper, it was probably just a media outlet. I don't think they were trying to smear it so much as get views. I got the vibe that the person interviewing, like, yeah, this should piss people off if we get quotes from this lawyer saying this, and look at, that was the vibe, where they were, there was a lawyer saying, this is a German outlet, I think it was GameStar.de. The lawyer that they interviewed was saying, no, this is ridiculous what we're asking for, because this is like if you had a membership at a gym, and when the gym closes or your membership ends, you don't expect to be able to take the equipment home with you. And so one, it's not even clear if this is considered a service under the law, but even if it is, well, the gym membership's going to tell you when it expires. Or three, let's say it was a lifetime membership, but the gym membership goes down. Okay, well, if every game company that did this went bankrupt when that happened, I would be kind of less aggressive about this. So yes, if Ubisoft had gone bankrupt because they shut down a game, that, okay, I get it. Nobody wins here. This is just kind of an accident that nobody wanted,
Absolutely.
All right. Well, let's get to the super chats. Plenty to get through. If you've got any questions about the campaign or any questions to Ross about anything in general, now's the time to ask them with your wallets. Starting with Dr. Theo, who gives $5 and says, "Admit it, you guys have also thought about what Silent Hill would cook up if you walked in there." I mean, sure. I never killed my wife. I think it would be pretty fucking weak sauce, but.
Oh, is that based on your psyche?
Yeah.
Oh, Jesus Christ. I don't know what I'd find in there.
I guess it might confront me with my dog that died.
I think it would just be me. Just bare knuckle boxing me.
Just you punching yourself in the face? For
not at all. It's just me.
David C. gives $5 Canadian and says, what Ubisoft did to the crew loosely reminds me of how Amazon deleted Orwell's Animal Farm and 1984 books from Kindle customers. Ironic choices.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
There have been like a few examples so far of like digitally purchased movies, digitally purchased books that have been removed from people's devices, even though they paid for them. And so I think people are beginning to understand kind of the age of non-ownership that we live in, which I think is helping the cause.
Like,
Oh yeah.
tell me if I'm a little tinfoil hat and tie here, but I feel like gamers are sort of guinea pigs when it comes to consumer ownership, in that sense of like, what are they okay with me getting rid of? Because if for the crew, right, it goes down and it's like, who cares? No one's playing that game anymore. Every time someone sort of defends the practice of just sort of diminishing your ownership, I feel that emboldens other companies that may not be in gaming. Like subscription services, yeah, we eat them all the time, but now there's subscription services for like cars, right? Like it's just gonna keep on pushing through.
I've had that thought that maybe this is a testing ground for like other industries, like because again, people say, well, that's just games; those are just for kids, whatever, Yeah. And in fact, I have a theory that if we just get blocked on every single level in almost a comical fashion, then it makes me think that okay, we've stumbled into something that some higher forces do not want disrupted, because they need to see what people will tolerate and what they won't. So.
Video games are on the cutting edge of everything. They're on the cutting edge of tech, of like artistic expression, and of evil cyberpunk futures.
Oh, I didn't like that last one.
What was that last one I said?
Well, at least rollerblading might come back.
Yes! Oh, I rollerbladed so much when I was a teenager.
BS Marsh gives $5 and says, Frost, I really loved your new cold take, as I worked in the restaurant industry for decades, so here's a small token of my appreciation.
Oh, a tip, you say? Thank you. But yeah, no, I 100% agree with the. To me, it's always been like at what end? To what end? How far are we pushing it? That's why I jumped on the tipping conversation with Mike Ybarra, because it just seems to never end. I don't know if that's a cynical mindset. I just, from my OSHA background, I go, the more you let slide, the harder it is to undo the slide. And actually,
clarify, this is that position. Who was it who took this position? That maybe we could think of tipping video games that we like so that they can make a little bit of extra money.
Mike Ybarra, the former president of Blizzard.
Yeah, that guy.
Ooh.
He said that?
Yeah, they're still looking for wherever they can nickel and dime. He was just testing the waters,
Wow.
I think.
I think they heard Take-Two made a statement where they'd like to be able to charge people by the hour for games if they could. I was thinking, wow, we're going back to arcade standards then almost.
No, it's like, I'm going to make like a cranker that like Jack has, but you get to put quarters in. I'm going to put quarters in the Steam Deck, whatever it is. I'm going to find a way.
I have that little handheld, the Playdate, that has the crank on it, like the indie handheld.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, like advertise it as an exercise machine where you need to crank it every couple of hours, and people will pay big money for it.
Shashank7170 gives 40 rupees and says, "Hey Ross, love your game dungeons."
Thanks. I plan to get back to him as soon as I can. This is a detour, not a shift.
We appreciate you taking the time away from funny videos to something, remarkably important.
To something I wish I didn't have to do. Yeah.
Thank you for stumbling into this on behalf of everyone.
Yeah, that way we can just point at you instead of having to be you.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But speaking personally, though, yeah, I'm a big fan of game dungeons myself.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a very big player of games while listening to video essays on the other monitor, and Game Dungeon is like a staple for those sessions.
Mm-hmm.
I have a great one I was working on that got kind of sidetracked by this. I'm looking at one.
See, if you guys want your game dungeon back, and apparently a juicy one, sign this petition so we can get the man back to his gaming.
There you go.
Yeah, like it.
Dale Mallows gives $5 and says, "Can you guys pause for a sec? I got to poop."
Tragic.
Sorry.
We missed him.
He sent that a while back, so presumably he's shat himself by now.
Ooh.
Beneath 11111 gives 20 Swedish krona and says, "For Dale Mallows, no." God knows what that means. Goes over my head.
I'm sure it's reference to something.
Permafrosty79 gives $5 and says, how do you feel about games that are pseudo-shutdown, i.e. games that relied on GameSpy or other outside service? What should devs do in these cases?
Well, I guess 2 points. One, a few points. I don't like that either. I'm just going for the most black and white violation, and hopefully we can get some benefits downstream from that, where maybe we just get protection to have the game from being destroyed, but but the courts still don't understand the difference between like a multiplayer mode, if it's like a mixed mode, like what you're talking about, where the single player still works, but then the multiplayer is bricked. Maybe that leads to somebody else being emboldened by these new rights to kind of press charges on that, and then that gets heard, or we get things more clearly defined. And I lost my other thoughts. So maybe that's the next question. I'll think of it later.
Fox D gives $5 and says, are live service / online only games just disposable consumables and not durable works of art? And what does that say about the medium if so?
It's like was it live performance? What do you say?
Well, I don't see how you can say, like, as we say, all the music and art and stuff that goes into a game is just a disposable thing. I mean, someone put work into it. There was a point where it didn't exist, and now that it does, I don't think that's something we should just throw away easily. But
you mentioned a live performance. A live performance takes actual people to operate, whereas the only withholding factor is just having access to that server software typically. So the service can go indefinitely if people could have access to that. So that's kind of a artificial service in my opinion. But
maybe it's more akin to like closing down a public space. You know, like we used to have a park that these plays would be performed in, but the park got shut down by an evil corporation who wanted to build something. I'm just thinking of an 80s movie. And then the scrappy teens need to save the park.
Gotta dance for our park.
Yeah. Oh, it's Breakin'. This is the plot of Breakin'.
You'd want to go to the corporations and say, do you want to be the evil corporation in Breakin'? Because that's what you're being.
I'm okay with that. I don't mind if they're going to be evil. I just want to know. I just want to know where we stand.
Like I think comparing live services to something like a live performance, they are relatively similar. But I think the thing we keep saying over and over again is it's all about the expectation.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, if I go to see a movie, or if I want to own a movie, I expect to be able to watch that movie anytime. If I go to see a live performance, I know that I get to watch this for an hour and a half, and then it just sits in my mind. And so part of hopefully, you know, what this does is helps give gamers a better expectation of what they're paying for, which could change how long we can play games, could change the prices, or it might not change anything, but I think it's a good stepping stone.
Yeah, and with live performances, you're usually not investing tens of millions of dollars and years of effort for just like one showing, and then that's it. You know, it's the proportions can be off for AAA companies.
Sure.
Yeah. Rob Mace, member for 5 months in the Green Gang, says, I paid money for CSGO and now it's gone. Frowny face.
Oh.
That's right. CSGO 2. I don't know what the official name is for it. A lot of people weren't too happy with the state it entered in. I don't know if it's better now. I've been off of that scene for a while. Was it not just an engine upgrade?
I could be wrong, but I think I heard that you can run the old version of CSGO separately and then find other people who want to connect to it. So if that's wrong, I rescind everything I'm saying. But there's a difference between they made much less popular and it's much more of a pain in the ass to run it versus just dead. Like it is gone 100%. So I'm not trying to fight for the ones that make it a pain in the ass. That's half my gaming already. So
Wesley Thomas gives 10 Canadian dollars. Says, it really stings when you buy a game and it gets taken away. Dead Space Mobile, I still miss you. P.S. Will there be a Stellar Blade review? Last second censorship, still in the same ballpark, IMO. Stellar Blade is the game that's on my to-do list to start playing this very afternoon, Wesley Thomas.
Last second censorship. See, this is an interesting one because what's happened aside from let's get away from all the raunchy stuff, is the characters localized differently depending on the nations because different nations have different ideas of like what can and can't be shown, and so they give a little bit more clothing in some of them, and people are taking that as censorship, alteration. And this goes back to like where's the line of alteration? You know, where it's like it's still my vision, it's not what I paid for, et cetera, et cetera.
This is a very wibbly wobbly realm. I mean, it's comparable to when they released Carmageddon in Europe. Some countries were allowed to have like the humans that just bled red blood. Some countries had to swap them out for green-blooded zombies. In Germany, they just had to swap the zombies out for robots.
Or World of Warcraft, I think in China, they can't have the skeletons and the ghosts.
Yeah.
Or things like that.
Yeah, Smite. All the skulls had to be removed for localization in China. Well.
Yeah, I think it's people are bringing it up as like a censorship debate as part of the whole, government control debate. But when you're talking about lots of different countries, it's too muddy to dip a toe into, if you ask me.
Sure, I think it's just very Western centric, isn't it? That's why I think like this whole thing has sort of been normalized because it's America in general that's sort of like, it is what it is, whereas it's Europe, it's Australia that goes, no, that's not how goods work. Like they never have. Same thing with
We'll
like
find
tipping.
out.
Tipping sounds normal in America, but everywhere else they're like, who the hell is using gratuity?
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah. Storm Templar gives $5 and says, big fan of all three of you for a decade plus. Is there any allies we might get in the industry? CDPR has preservation and no DRM as selling point of GOG. It's a good question, Ross. What sort of support has come in from the development / publishing side of the industry, if any?
Well, I mean, I've heard of a few smaller developers have reached out to me in support of it. Probably the biggest one I know, I saw people told me about on Twitter, was Running with Scissors. The people made the Postal games. They're all for this. Let's see. Hey, I'll take.
Yeah.
Well, Postal's interesting. Like, it's definitely a game. They definitely make games of note.
Yeah, they've carved out a niche for themselves. Let's say that.
Yeah, I do have a contact with GOG, and they're interested in maybe making a statement on this, and maybe getting in touch with one of the members of Parliament that European Parliament, being able to talk about this. Maybe they can kind of create publicity for both sides or something like that.
Sure.
For the most part, I don't know of a lot, but it could be I just don't know. My head's just been kind of trying to grind through as much of this as I can, so
Absolutely.
may not be aware of everything.
Do you think, I mean, the timing was a little too close to say it was because of you, but Xbox themselves has become more and more vocal about offering games preservation as features for future consoles and whatnot. Do you think, if not you directly, this sort of stuff will sort of be, I guess, selling points? If not any legislation going through, but a selling point of like, hey, I won't destroy your games, Sony. You know?
I'm too cynical to say yes, but I'd love to be proven wrong. And even with the Xbox thing, I think what they're really doing is backwards compatibility, kind of bringing it forward. So it's preservation in a sense. It's just not the worst of the worst that I'm dealing with on this sort of thing. So that's helpful, but it's not the same kind of existential level that they're talking about.
I think it's very easy to just say you're going to preserve games. I mean, who knows if that's going to be the case like in 10 years when no one's talking about your game anymore and it can quietly drop out of sight.
Mm-hmm.
Dale Mellows gives $5 and says, in reply to Fox D, I don't believe a game made by committee can or should be considered art. At best, it's kitsch. At worst, it's junk food. It's a little internal argument going on there.
I think that goes back to the subjective view that I meant or referred to earlier.
Whoever pays more is right in this argument, is all I'm saying.
I don't think the fact that it's committee design should preclude anything as art. I think art is in the perception of the user. As you say, everyone extracts their own experience from it. If you think something is art, then maybe it is art. But then that's a very old debate.
Look, old Renaissance paintings that people value, those are commissioned by the church, a lot of them. You know, it's, you know, the artist does, just because they don't have control over every aspect of it doesn't mean that there is an artistic value. And just by coincidence, I am a fan of the Crew game, and it's the second largest driving game ever made. And in my opinion, it represents a ground level view of the United States better than any other game I've ever seen. So that's something for that, you know, even if the circumstances are much more commercial and they're just trying to push product and that sort of thing.
Absolutely. I think like design by committee is an easy and in my opinion lazy criticism, because it devalues any sort of collaboration. Like, oh wait, more than 5 people worked on something? No, design by committee. That's not art.
I mean, there are plenty of games that feel like they were designed by committee, and that's what I object to.
Agreed.
Incidentally, you said it's the second biggest car game.
On that too.
Would I be right in assuming the Crew 2 is the biggest one?
No, because I mean, it's a little subjective. The Crew 2 has the same map, except they removed parts. So instead of an amusement park, it's just a field. Or they erased some small towns. There's a space shuttle launch area they just got rid of that. Now they added some boat races, but then that's not technically driving. So if we're talking about the biggest driving game, I think the Crew is still number 2, and then Fuel is the biggest one, but that's kind of a different animal, what that is.
And are either of them bigger than Euro Truck Simulator? That's my question.
Yeah.
Europe's tiny.
Well, you say that.
Compared
take
to
a while to walk
America?
across.
There's
Yeah,
a
take
lot
a
of
while to
road.
walk across it still.
Euro Truck Simulator is going to have a much higher quality ratio per square mile than something like Fuel, but yeah.
I want a driving game that takes place in Google Maps. Just go to my house.
They've got that. It's called Google Street View.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah, but this doesn't have the tactile nature of the car.
Well,
also, it's outdated.
You could just pretend.
Yeah, I do.
Witticism gives $10 and says, I did some research on games during law school, and video game law is very underdeveloped in a way that benefits publishers. Almost all suits are settled, because why risk a court making some bad law?
Well, if you're in the United States, it's probably worse than that, because I was lucky enough to get some pro bono high-level research help on this for the U.S., and the court case that kind of screwed us all is Proprietary versus Zeidenberg, where basically the ruling was, okay, software is complicated, so we're just going to kind of defer to the end user license agreement for almost everything. And there is some gray area under that, but the ability to continue running a game that you paid for is not part of that. That's pretty much deferred by the license agreement. So I'm not optimistic at all for getting direct progress in the United States on this. That's why so much of this is international.
Sure.
It's interesting to think that the underdevelopment of video game law is benefiting publishers now, because, of course, in the past, it always benefited the player. I mean, this was the whole abandonware thing that was never tested in the courts. Should people still be allowed to pirate games if no one's selling them and no one's supporting them? And, like, technically no, but it was never tested in the courts.
Well, it was, if we're talking legally, then no. I mean, all abandoned, there's no legal term for abandonware. It's all illegal, technically. Now, of course, the reality is abandonware sites, the way they usually operate is they put the game up, and then if nobody complains, they leave it up. If they get a cease and desist, they take that game down. And so they can kind of exist between the cracks like that, you know?
Sure.
As long as nobody cares, you're golden.
I'm seeing someone, a user comment, a similar thought that I've seen messing around the internet now, which is if someone tried to invent a library nowadays, it probably wouldn't happen because of copyright issues and all of this legal mess. We are very fortunate that we have libraries as historical precedent.
I never thought of that. There's some dystopia for you.
I mean, I don't think you could have sort of come across a better example than France, who would fight Amazon for the libraries and whatnot, and they use common law, which is very much because the way America and Britain work is sort of like do what you want until somebody gets killed, and then I'm gonna say you can't do that, and then I'm gonna try to keep track of all this kind of stuff happening. Whereas France is more so, this is how I want things to work, and if it doesn't hit one of these, you're doing something illegal, and I'm gonna look into it. So that's where you got your best bet of just like, wait a minute, this isn't how goods work at all.
Yeah, I said in my video, if we can't win on this, we're never gonna win. At least that's what I think.
Normally we hate outdated laws, but in this way, how draconic it is kind of works to your favor. Good.
Well, on that subject, Hjort87 gives 20 Danish kroner and says, "It's not illegal is the lowest bar. I want ethics."
I'm aiming slightly higher than that, and I just want the games to not be destroyed. This isn't going to stop every other grubby game practice in the industry. Just, okay, if we can at least not literally destroy the games. A friend of mine compared this to, it's like, okay, we're trying to stop muggings. We're not trying to stop the con games. If you lose your money to the shell game on the street, okay, well then that's still on you. But we're trying to stop somebody just taking what your money.
You don't change money with ethics. You change it with more money. That's why I say, pat Phil Spencer on the back every time he talks about games preservation.
Sure.
Just pit them against each other.
Lampy gives £20 and says, "How are you balancing what you're asking for with others who just feel entitled to have access? So often people just don't want to pay for a product and claim they want preservation as a way to justify piracy."
Well, I think most developers don't really worry about piracy once they're no longer selling the game and no longer supporting it and never have intentions to touch it again. I should make that clear. Everything we're doing would not change anything that companies are doing while the game is being supported. So if they want an online-only game and that's unpiratable, sure. Everything's focused on when support ends. And hey, some of them can go really long time. I mean, there's still MMOs from the 90s that are running today. I think EverQuest is still supported. We're basically saying, do whatever you want as a company, except once you're done with it, the people who have paid you, they need to be able to run it in some fashion. So I think if that's not a good enough balance, I mean, geez, what are you asking for,
Free stuff. That's what. It's piracy has turned into this whole moral thing. Just say you like stealing things. It's fine. You don't have to justify it. I take this because I want stuff.
Well, I should point out the crew has never been pirated. In fact, a lot of these games have never been pirated because of the way it's structured. It's incredibly difficult. You'd have to reverse engineer a server emulator, which I'm fine with. It's just that's not an excuse to destroy the game forever. That you want piracy protection. That's all.
No, it's very similar to what I know, a lot of farmers, a lot of people who own electronics are dealing with, which is the right to repair movement that's also happening. Where it's if I buy a tractor and a part breaks, I want to be able to fix that part and not have to pay a subscription service to John Deere or whatever in order to fix it. I bought the tractor. I'm not renting the tractor. And so to me, it's very similar things with the crew where it's no, I bought a thing. Let me use the thing I bought. Yeah, absolutely.
Doran Grossman Naples gives $5 and says, "I want the pre-MS Minecraft model. Once you buy the game, you can play any version from pre-alpha to now, single player or private server, any OS."
That's a dream, isn't it?
Actually, I've heard of that. If you talk about a real compromise, the best version I've heard of is you buy software or a game and you get that version. You own that. but then maybe updates down the line, you have to pay, or you get updates for a year or something. But then if you buy the 2.5 version, you get to keep that. But then a few years later, 5.0 is out and it's cool and has all this extra stuff. Okay, well then you pay a little bit for that. That's not as consumer friendly, but that seems to me a good compromise for developers who want to keep working on stuff, but can't do it for free, you know, but.
That's how Adobe editing software worked for ages. Is you would buy the one version, and that would last you 5 years until they came out with the cool new version, and then much like everything else, they switched over to a subscription service.
I still use Photoshop 6.0. Not because I'm like taking a high moral stand against subscription. I'm just comfortable with where everything is in Photoshop 6.0.
Fair.
Alex Armstrong gives $5 and says, I like detective games and point-and-click adventures, but I lack the intuitiveness, I think intuition is the word you're after there, Alex Armstrong, to solve them without guides. Should I keep trying or give up and watch Let's Plays? Well, for me, Alex, solving puzzles is why you play detective games and point-and-click adventures. I like solving puzzles. I like feeling clever. That's why I like Obra Dinn so much. And that's why I was so disappointed that you can only really play that game once. And once you've figured all the puzzles out, there's no more of that satisfaction of going, aha.
I'd say there's a big range. I mean, there are puzzles no one on earth is going to figure out in some adventure games. And then there's others that can kind of... So maybe look up the easiest ones and kind of work your way up from there. That's what I would recommend. And then figure out where your cutoff is, you know?
There you go.
Nick Knoll gives $5 and says, do you buy the argument that a company can't afford to make a game's server code public after sunsetting because it's proprietary and is still in use?
There can be cases like that where let's say there's like middleware licenses associated with running that server where they only had the license for a certain amount of time for their company. So to release that publicly would just be a huge contract violation. And yeah, the cost would be unfathomable. To my understanding, these laws are not going to be retroactive. So we're basically talking about, so yeah, that might be an excuse for some games today. However, that's not an excuse for saying, oh, so therefore we can never make a game that has an end-of-life plan. That's the thing to distinguish. That if they knew this is going to be a requirement in 2 years, they could adapt to that. Plus, if that was a known requirement in many markets, there would probably be a gold rush of middleware to meet those standards immediately. Saying, yeah, here, you can click these 3 buttons and here's your end-of-life build, you know, for when you want to shut it down later. Because that would be a market ready to be filled.
Sure.
Bones of AU gives £5 and says, credit to Marvel's Avengers for at least ditching the cash shop and just give everybody the MTX costumes rather than perma-locking gear post-support. Yeah, I guess it's still playable. I was reading a headline the other day that it's still got more simultaneous players than what Suicide Squad has now.
That's not too hard.
Whiplash SL gives $10 and says, I spoke with a filmmaker at the university I attend about art preservation in the digital era, and they had a very stark question about that. What deserves to be preserved versus what gets left behind?
Well, in my opinion, that's up to the people who care about this stuff. Yeah, to be clear, I'm not trying to have every game preserved. I'm trying to, what I'm trying to do is if somebody wants to preserve a game, they can. That's what I'm after. Because if a game's garbage and literally nobody cares about this, fine, we lose it. That's tough, you know? Like,
right. I mean, at the end of the day, we can't preserve everything forever. You know, things will slip through the cracks and get lost through time. That's just how time works. But agreed, the ability to save things is all we're looking for.
Especially if you paid for it.
Especially if you already paid for it, absolutely.
The answer to that question is pretty straightforward. What deserves to be preserved? Anything that at least one person with the wherewithal to preserve it wishes to preserve.
There you go.
Put that on a shirt.
There you go. Fox D gives $5 and says, I wonder about some opera in the 19th century that nobody's heard in 2 centuries because it wasn't Die Fledermaus or Carmen and it got forgotten. Well, 'twas ever thus, Fox D. I mean, if they, like, you've forgotten, you didn't record the conversation you had with your mum 2 weeks ago. Is that a great loss to human culture?
Maybe. Well, she spit some fat beats, you know? We'll never know.
I mean, I'm so used to being able to listen back to conversations because I do all these podcasts and streams and stuff. Sometimes after I've had like a call like for work with the guys, and then afterwards I'm thinking, oh, I need something to listen to. I'll listen back to the conversation I just had. And then I realize I can't because it was a work call and not a stream.
It sounds like the path to madness for me, but
Right.
I saw an article somebody sent me recently. It's estimated 75% of films in the silent era no longer exist because they would just kind of burn down the film for the silver or extract other stuff, and
That's true.
that's it. So yeah, that's already happened.
This was a huge problem with like early BBC stuff as well, because their policy was just to destroy stuff to clear the space. And there's like reams of classic Doctor Who episodes that like the fan base are all like would all like pay through the nose for, and they literally just have to ask people, did anyone happen to record this with their VCRs at the time it came out? Because we'd love to hear from you.
Doesn't that predate VCRs? Those or
Yeah, that's the problem. Yeah.
yeah, I was gonna say.
No, and of course, like also everything that we continue to make things on is disposable. You know, film degrades over time. Even hard drives collapse over the years, and so it's entropy comes for us all in the end.
Do what I do. Get into writing books. Then at least you got a box of comp copies. You could at least show someone if the entire internet goes down tomorrow.
Don't you have to send copies of that to the British Library?
Oh, well, I haven't. Maybe somebody did. Maybe the publisher did.
Yeah, because they asked for like a copy of everything ever written. One.
Yeah.
Not every library, one of them. So
yeah, they don't display. They don't display all the books they have, but yeah, technically,
that's the strange
they're
thing,
supposed to have a copy.
Where like games for being art, if you will, are also part like toys and machinery. So preserving it and playing it, keeping it purchasable, keeping it functioning are just so like 3 different things here. So.
Well, I think the internet has demonstrated, as we say, that if at least one person cares, then they could preserve it if they want, and that's kind of what the internet is. Everyone who cares about something preserves it somewhere.
You say that, and then some intern's going to trip over the servers. And just, there it is. All the internet predating 2010 gone.
I mean...
Yeah.
Oops, my Discord call froze.
Oh, no.
Oh, you're fine, yeah.
Oh, no. We still see you and hear you.
Hello? Am I back?
Yeah,
Yes, you are still here.
You're still here.
Yeah, you all froze on me for a second there.
Oh, okay.
That was weird. Where were we? J Galstar 1 gives $5 and says, speaking of preservation, Yahtzee, I'm rewatching your old Dev Diary series and the game download links are broken. Do you still have them to rehost? Yeah, early on the game download links were like linked to the site, but later on all the game downloads were added to my itch.io page. So if you go to yzcrowshaw.itch.io, all the games are up there.
God bless itch.io. Love that.
Fox D gives $5 and says, I'm not okay with sunset stroke last update dates on games when EU4 and Euro Truck Simulator 2 are still getting updates after over a decade and adding value.
I mean, you would say that, but like the Factorio devs who were working on their game for quite a while have finally said this is the last one. The thing we're doing after this is going to be a whole, like essentially another game that we're going to be throwing into there. So,
also people like Eric Barone who would just update games with new stuff on a whim without asking for extra money. Kinda, setting a hard act to follow for everyone else.
He's got like millions. What do you need more money for? He needs more time is what he needs.
Well, I can understand devs wanting to move on to something new for them.
Well,
too,
that's how I see it. I mean, I make games, but having to like maintain it for the rest of my life feels like one of the circles of hell. I want to move on to the next idea I'm excited about. Like most creatives, surely. Lampy gives £10 and says, how is this for games different what happens in cloud-provided software? Cloud services have the same problem of something you bought not being accessible. Ultimately, games are software.
Well, the biggest thing is the licensing, where they're like, here's when you lose access. You know, it's just too cloudy, for lack of a better phrase. Like, you just don't know when you're going to lose the access. It needs to be, if you're going to do the thing, be clear about when you're going to do the thing. That's like the minimum that we can go for.
And theoretically, like obviously this would be like real pie in the sky thinking, is something like legislation on, you know, giving people access to games, to software, could have a rippling effect into other versions of software. That's, I mean, obviously that is not what you are going for. Oh no.
No, it's okay. You're not the first person to have that thought, but
right.
I'm trying not to raise the alarm. That's not my goal personally. For the record, that's not my goal because that's too big. But that's you're right, that could happen. You know.
No, and I don't think that is a viable, like that's like, you know, 20, 30 years down the line. But but you're right, it's all software.
Chris Fratz gives $5 and says there's two ways you can get UT2K4 back online. Either enter a command in the console to redirect the master server list, or edit an ini.
I think you can just specify the IP address you want. Like if you hit join game, and maybe it's for authentication thing.
Kid Kangaroo gives €5 and says veterans of YT gaming uniting to fight the good fight. Love to see it. I do hope for Freeman's Mind 2 to finish before 2030. Such a great series.
Yeah, I'm doing too many things, but this is a temporary, this is a detour.
I think we can all agree you're doing something significantly more important than the funny YouTube videos. We all love the funny YouTube videos, but we're all okay with you taking a little detour here.
It's like, man's was side questing his whole life. Now he's got to do the main quest. I don't want to be the Dovahkiin.
So I had a flashback to the end of Evil Dead 2 for a second there. And all the crowd going, hail, hail, and Nash just going, no. SDH gives $19.99 and says, seeing Ross and Yahtzee on the same screen is so surreal to me. Here's some money. Feels pretty surreal for me, because as I say, I've been watching Ross's stuff since probably right from the beginning of Freeman's Mind.
We've seen a lot of zero punctuation.
Yeah, we've corresponded once before in the past after I nicked one of your jokes accidentally.
Yeah, and that was never a big deal. Like some people said, I was just kind of a prod when I made that statement. You know, it's just like, yeah, thanks. You know.
Yeah, this is the first time we've spoken face to face, as it were. I'm enjoying it. Lampy gives £5 and says, to clarify my cloud point, cloud services that charge a one-time access fee for lifetime access.
Okay.
All right then. Thanks for clarifying. Chris Fratz comes back with $5 and says, I'm 23 years old and I was playing Unreal Tournament 2K4 on Saturday and having a great time getting some frags. It should not have been delisted. Well, what's the problem then, Chris Fratz? You got your game.
You were playing.
Yeah, you're having fun. Good for you. Lucas M gives $20 and says one possible bad end to this would be that companies would be further encouraged to only make free-to-play games, so you have no sense of ownership. What do you think of it?
They're already doing that.
That's something we're looking into. Okay, I'll mention this in my video. The free-to-play games, you know, they run on microtransactions for the funding. Those are one-time purchases. So if the law considers those goods, well, then in order to access your one-time purchase, you need the game running in some form once they're done with it. It's the same logic. So, there might not even be that much of a distinction. It's the only big distinction is for the subscription games like World of Warcraft. World of Warcraft would be way harder to do because you pay your 30 days, they're your 30 days. That's a service. It's not unclear. However, I think that's literally 5 games now. Maybe there's another I don't know of. There's World of Warcraft, Final Fantasy 11 and 14, EVE Online, there was another newer space game I forgot the name of. I don't know of any other games that have survived that still run on subscription only. Or
Sure.
so I can live with those losses.
Also, Lucas M, you're sort of operating on the assumption that companies only ever want to do the thing that makes money. I want to believe that there are people in developers, maybe buried beneath layers and layers of committees, that actually want to creatively express themselves still.
Oh.
Yeah, but they often aren't the ones in charge, is the problem.
Well,
Yeah, I bet if developers could vote on whether to end I bet there would probably be 90% less.
Yeah.
What is
I mean,
that? Smarty's gone. You're the hopeful one now.
I assume developers want their games to be played. I know I do.
Yeah.
I mean, this is all like publisher side, the stuff we're complaining about.
Yeah.
Eric Weikart. Oh, hello, Eric. He's doing his thing where even though he's editing the podcast, he pays a super chat so he can get a word in edgeways. He gives 50 arses and says, didn't a CEO recently say people should be able to tip games they bought? And now an insider joke. What is next? Tipping my own workplace?
Tipping
Here's a
landlord.
Here's a question, Eric. What is health insurance in America if not tipping your own workplace?
You guys tip?
It's like having a tip automatically extracted from your paycheck every month so you can go to the doctor.
Oh, that's so sad, but true.
I might as well. I'm paying it already,
Fox D gives $5 and says, Take-Two wants to charge me by the hour. Please, nobody tell them how many hours I've put into Civilization 5. I can't afford it.
What game were they talking about specifically, or were they just throwing that up in the air like John Riccatello is saying, I want to charge for bullets? Did they have a specific in mind? That's the thing. They just throw out these like what if practices and hope someone else tries it because I don't have the balls for it myself.
Well, they want to see what they can get away with, I suppose. They like every now and again they'll throw out an idea and everyone says that's awful, don't do that. And someone does it, and then everyone says that's awful, like we said it would be. But then they just keep doing it, and eventually we all run out of energy. And that's just how things are now. If people are willing to actually pay the money, then it's going to stick around because that's all that matters.
That's true. That's true. Like there have definitely been times where I have like, I've bought some stuff in Rocket League because it's like, I played enough Rocket League. I'm okay giving them a little bit more money because I've played it for X amount of hours. So I'm okay spending a little more money. Same with games like Team Fortress 2 or Overwatch, where I have hundreds of hours into the game, where it's like I can tell myself I've earned spending some money on boxes or skins or whatever. So I bet a large faction of consumers will say, well, I guess I'm okay playing by the hour as long as every hour is fun. Well, this hour isn't very fun, but maybe I'll pay a little bit because the next hour might be fun.
That was a funny one someone brought up where it's like, if I have, what is it? Oh, shit. I forgot what it was. It was about getting money back, essentially. It was like, if you can take this game at any point, then I should be allowed a refund at any point. And even I was on the Reddit. I don't know if it was real. Somebody said that they got a refund for their crew, the first crew game after like 10 some years. Oh. And did you hear about that?
I think I did. I think it was for PlayStation 4 that they did. Some did that, but no. I was gonna say that's not the focus of my campaign because there's not going to be enough people getting refunds for this to have like a shockwave effect in the industry. But you can try, especially if you're in Europe or Australia, you can try to have, if you just want your game, not even the crew, but any game that does this or a DLC, contact your consumer protection agency, say, hey, I want my money back. You might get it. I'm not pursuing that as part of the campaign because that doesn't lead a direct path to stopping this practice. But I'm not against you trying. You might be able to get your money back. It's
I
do online only gaming for free if you want.
I tried to get mine back from Blizzard for Overwatch 1, and they didn't really say no so much as they're like, our system isn't made to handle this request, so we're gonna have to say no.
Well, that's one way to roadblock yet, isn't it?
Yeah, they're like, you played too many hours so long ago. Like
Computer said no. Computer said no. Sorry.
Well, don't do this directly to the companies. Do it to the Consumer Protection Agency in your country. Is what.
Well, you got to get their nose first. As
yeah, you're right. You're right. That's usually a first step, and then.
Steamtastic Vagabond gives $2.79 Canadian dollars and says console with a coin slot you have to pay to empty. So that would all just be your money, though, wouldn't it, Steamtastic Vagabond? You put in your own money to get your own money back. I don't think you've thought this through, Steamtastic Vagabond.
But some people would kill for that. Absolutely, man.
Wait a minute.
I used to have a coin-operated bubblegum machine in my front room.
And you loved
I had
it.
the key. I had the key for it. I'd just take a coin out and put it back in to have my bubblegum. I mean, I was paying for the bubblegum as well, but it was fun to pretend I was
being a bit naughty.
Yeah. It's just a fun thing to have.
I've shortchanged myself. Ooh.
Rose Delta gives $5 and says, fun remark, an old co-worker who's from China was shocked we pay for Final Fantasy XIV by the month and not per hour played.
That's right. They've got cafes, don't they?
Oh, sure.
Steamtastic Vagabond comes... Yeah, certainly does seem to be. Steamtastic Vagabond comes back with $2.79 Canadian and says, localized censorship is still censorship.
Sure.
We won't breach this topic. Obviously, we're here to talk about something else. You know, we're not here to define what censorship is. And if a creative person agrees to make a change, is it censorship? You know, if someone else has an idea,
that's editing, isn't it?
Right.
If I say you're wrong, will you pay more money to say that I'm wrong? Because I don't mind the back and forth.
I mean, I've worked with editors on my work, and they say, "Hey, can we just remove this reference here because some people might be offended?" I'm like, "Yeah, whatever. Not a huge skin off my back." Is it
right?
Would they get up my ass if they knew about that?
Right. So it's like, you know, we're not here to solve or define what censorship is. We're here to talk about something else. Next.
Well. sticking with that subject because Eric comes along with 100 asses and says, to the above dono, a worldwide release requires to compromise with all regions' regulations or do changes per region, but this seems ignored and devs get blamed. Metopia is a kids game, but it's 18 plus on Russia.
What?
Is that because you can have same-sex relationships in that game? Because that's usually the case.
Oh, sure.
If you can have same-sex relationships in something like The Sims, then it has to be like adults only in Russia.
Gotcha.
Sure. I mean, it's like Balatro got knocked off of some stores in South Korea, and I forget where else because it has poker themes. It's got gambling themes, not gambling itself, just the themes.
Sure.
So there is no blanket censorship, I'd say.
Blistered Soul gives $1.99 and says, Dev Diary Collection game on Steam to preserve it.
Yeah, you hypocrite. Where is it?
It's already all there on itch.io. Free to download. Help yourself. I mean, do you want me to just pack it all into one zip?
Don't forget to tip.
I mean, I could do that. Tomix1199 gives $10 and says, are you fighting for all games that are currently alive, or is this more of all future games to be developed should be left in a playable state after end of support?
Whatever we can get. But it's most likely going to be the future ones that primarily. Yeah. I don't get to decide that. That's going to be courts and look at that.
I mean, ideally, it would be nice for everything to be.
I could see it being kind of a shockwave. I think it would be fair to give some lead-in time for a lot of publishers and developers, but that won't be my decision. So.
Dark Esh member for 1 month in ad-free podcasts, and then Fass gives £9.99 to say can't catch stream right now but can catch podcast later. Just want to say thanks for all the great content. Also, Frost, I know you caught a lot of flack lately, but keep your chin up. Cold Take is amazing.
Flack? Who's been flack?
Flack?
I've been getting flack.
Oh, was this the Helldivers 2 thing?
Oh, that's not flack. That's just gaming, you know. You don't like this game, I don't like.
Oh,
Cheers. Yeah.
there you go.
Tommy Salty gives 10 PLNs and says, "What aspect of gaming do you find worth preserving?" Well, I think
Cutscenes.
there's a lot of answers to that, and a lot of people will have different answers. For me, I'm interested in interactive narrative and game design and the new gameplay ideas that people come up with to express emotional storytelling and narrative. Those are the things that are most interesting to me.
Start menus for me. Like,
You like start menus?
if you can just keep a library of all the start menus in all games, I'd be happy.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
There's probably an archive
You
somewhere.
ever seen Forsakens? That's an impressive start menu.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Like all of the above, really, for me. But one thing in particular for me is I love game worlds, especially when they put lots of effort into them. That's why even these games that, if it feels like it's designed by committee and the writing's not so good, the gameplay is okay, but wow, this world has a lot of detail. This is neat, and like seeing it. So,
Right.
my standards fluctuate a lot depending on the game of what to expect.
Absolutely.
You've done your part to get soundtracks released by the original musicians, haven't you?
Well, not even. It's more like like the abandonware thing. I just decided to go for it and hope there wouldn't be trouble with it. In these cases where, to the best of my knowledge, I was the only person in possession of some of these. So I'm thinking, I'm just going to release this and just, probably nobody cares, or the composer is happy to have it heard, So yeah, I love all kinds of soundtracks, even if I just don't care for that game in any other way, So
That's the difficulty when we talk about preservation or games as art or whatever, is because they are so complex. like oh, I just want to save the map of this world because I think it's a cool ass map. Everything else about this art sucks. That's like saying, I love the frame of this painting. I do not care for the painting.
John Brooks gives £10 and says, "Ross, been great having you here. Hope to get you back for an update in future, or even if they have you on a podcast just because."
Sure, I'd love to talk about something that's not this.
I'm sure you're getting sick of that lately.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're dipping a toe in regular guests. Maybe we've got some friends of the channel that we might be lining up, but we'll see how we go. Strum Theory gives 199 and says, "How long does Freeman's Mind take to make?"
There you go.
It varies. It's
I
like
wonder
if I'm really.
There's a lot of weird stuff you do sometimes. Like there was one episode.
How long does it take to write How long does it take to write a good chapter of a book? It's kind of, that's one way to look at it. There's a big variance there, but obviously, if you're under more pressure, it can speed that time up.
There's a question I had because there was an episode in Freeman's Mind 2 where you're on the water hazard level and you at the bit where you have to jump over the ramp in the hovercraft, and in the video you do this whole thing where Freeman takes planks off of a thing and nails them to the end of the ramp to extend it, which I want to say you can't do in the game. Did you just have a whole modded version of the game or something?
No, but I had help from somebody to mod just that part. It's in the credits. I forget exactly who it was on that one, but yeah, there were a few things where sometimes the gamey nature of Half-Life 2 would kind of bug me in that I'm trying to treat this like it's a real, like this is all real for Freeman. So when I see just real obvious things that I want to fix, I'm thinking, if I was in this situation, I would do this. That's why in the original one, I always had him doing pull-ups when you could bypass a big portion if you could just do a pull-up. So I kind of did a little trick by doing turning on no clip on and off and just trying to maneuver in that way. So.
First of all, pull-ups are hard. Pull-ups are really difficult to do.
I was writing about this. I was writing about realistic platformers in the old Prince of Persia sense, and I just did a little aside on there saying, have you ever tried that instantly? Have you ever tried pulling yourself up with just your arms onto a ledge without using your legs as well? Because
It's hard.
I have tried. It is really hard.
I do well. Not trying to brag, but I can do that.
What?
I can do everything that Freeman goes through except for the insane falls and getting shot at. So all the other jumps and climbing I'm capable of. But
Congratulations.
that reminded me.
Oh.
There's a movie, Mom and Dad Save the World. That's the best highlight I've seen of somebody struggling to do a pull up in any movie ever, where these aliens are chasing him, and if he could just pull himself up the ladder, he could do it. And you could see him just struggling with it. It's a great scene.
Finally, someone else who's seen that movie that's not just me. So good.
Sral Racer gives €6 and says, with how licenses work for cars and music in racing games, do you think you could get pushback from those companies?
It's possible, but I am not aware of any game that's had licensed music or car brands where the people who bought the game are no longer allowed to play it. It's usually that's a cutoff for being able to sell more copies of it by the publisher. So, I mean, if you have an old version of something like Crazy Taxi or now Project Cars or something, you can still play those. I don't know what's in their contracts, but literally every other game I'm aware of that has that's just a cutoff for when they can sell it, not when players who bought it can continue playing it.
That happens even now. You had like Stranger Things was providing licensing to like Smite and all these other crossover collaborations. And after the licensing expires, they get rid of the ability to buy it, but anyone who's bought it can still use it. So that's just how that works.
There you go.
Keeping the stuff you paid for. That's all you want.
Oh,
It seems so simple when we say it out loud.
What a novel concept. Gives $1.99 and says, Frost, glad you're feeling better.
Well, thank you.
Yes, you were laid up with wisdom tooth problems for the weekend.
Yeah,
I
too wise.
understand.
Tooth too big.
FT gives $5 and says, using a super chat to remind everyone to go to the Stop Killing Games site and do your part. Also, don't forget to sign the UK and AU petitions.
That's right. What's that website again?
StopKillingGames.com. All one word.
StopKillingGames.com. That sounds like a fantastic website to go to right now.
I mean, I'm a British citizen.
Yeah, it's kind of Spartan, actually. I didn't really want a lot of distractions. It's just to funnel people to the right place.
Oh, thank you, Eric. Eric is putting it a little screenshot of it up in the center of us all right now, so you even know what it looks like.
There you go.
You can, if you wanted to, you could even click through. It's very simple, step by step. Click your country, and it's like, here's the whole process for you. Very, very easy. For people
and if you're in America, it will just say, sorry.
Well, if you own the crew, you can help if you're an American, but I just had to go where the openings were,
Absolutely.
Snake in the Garden gives €5 and says, working in cloud security, it's all working towards meeting minimum standards for law first, then customer preference second. Ethics not even prioritized, IRL. Yeah, I assume as much, Snake in the Garden. Lampy gives £20 and says, Hypo. Yahtzee makes a game as a solo dev, no publisher. Has a server component required to run to express an idea. 4 years later, he doesn't want to support it anymore. Should he be forced to go back and make it work or be sued?
Well, I don't think you'll look getting sued, but you can just dump your files and move on. I mean,
there's nothing stopping you from doing that. Right. You just stick it all on GitHub or something.
Well, and like you've said before, Ross, like this is something that will theoretically, if anything happens, it will every game made before this will be grandfathered in. But now it will say that games going forward needs to have some sort of sunset plan, right?
It's not even clear to me put it like this, I would take that, but it's not even clear to me if they would be grandfathered in. It's more like if you're still selling this game after this date, when this law goes into effect, then you're on the hook for those newer copies. But if the only way this happened would be to grandfather in existing ones, fine. Like, we're still saving all the games of the future then. So,
yeah.
Whatever gets us to the finish line.
A superb owner gives $5 and says, "Here's some dollars for the pod's excellent new Jack DLC, although I do miss the classic Marty feature being included. How can players patch that back in? You can wait till next week, a superb owner, when Marty will be back." We've basically just swapped him out for Jack because Jack knows who Ross Scott is better than Marty does.
Now, I know who Ross Scott is, and also I'm an archivist in the movie industry. I spend a lot of my time digitizing VHS and maintaining archives and copies in that manner. So I have a small amount of expertise that is tangential to the conversation. Yeah.
Dr. Theo gives $2 and says, "Why not support community servers after death?" Well, exactly, Dr. Theo. Why not?
One did. Yeah, I don't know if you guys saw the article on that one. It was City of Heroes. They kind of the game died essentially, but the community did their best to sort of support their own server to the point where they got in sort of official licensing from the company, going, "Okay, if you meet our standards, we'll let you keep it alive. We're not going to add anything more. We're not going to charge microtransactions. You can't charge money for them, but you can keep it going if you want."
Hell yeah.
I think I even heard of wasn't there a version being run secretly the whole time?
It was,
or
yeah, it was
something? Like-
secretly the whole time because they're like, "We have to make sure everything's ready and perfect before we ask."
And
But
right?
yeah.
It's like, that's a great plan. It's like, yeah, you deal with it.
Yeah. It's a great plan to just go to people and say, "Hey, you don't have to do shit. We've got it all sorted."
And I
Yeah.
honestly, I don't even, like, I wouldn't be surprised if they just start letting you rent out licenses for servers. Sure.
Sure.
But if you void any of it, like franchising, like McDonald's, it's like, yeah, just meet my standards. You can host it. Have at it.
Yeah, I like it.
Chris Ratz. Oh, no, missed one. Longshanks gives £5 and says, "Fallout New Vegas runs like ass on Windows 10 and above, even with mods. Should a publisher be responsible for keeping a game compatible on future OS?"
I don't think so, because it says like minimum requirements, maximum requirements. Is there like a overkill requirements? Like anything beyond this is not my problem.
Well, like I said,
Yeah.
this is why we should have a date where we just flat out say we're not going to update it past this date.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for the record, nothing we're doing would involve that. When we talk about support, we're talking about at that exact day that the game doesn't work. So whatever the OS they supported was then, that's all it would apply to. So things in the future, hopefully the community can kind of work out. Or
Right. Like with City of Heroes, like in a perfect world, yeah, they would make things open enough for the community to figure it out. But no, a developer, a publisher is not responsible to make a game forever playable. Like once we go to hollow computers and transparent monitors, Fallout New Vegas shouldn't have to play on that, or Bethesda shouldn't have to make it play on that.
or like you said, if they list in the requirements, okay, only runs on this OS. Fine.
Exactly.
That's
Informed purchasing decisions is what we are asking for.
If you take away nothing else, that's the main point. Chris Fratz gives $2 and says, "Would you consider ports/remasters as preservation?" Yeah, how do you feel about something like the Resident Evil 4 remake and the original Resident Evil 4 no longer being available? I don't know how I feel about that sort of thing.
Well, it's in that Resident Evil 4, you can still play the original Resident Evil 4 and find a copy of it.
Yeah. I still have my copy and my GameCube. I can play it. I don't know about you.
I mean, yeah, as long as the original wasn't destroyed in all forms forever, then fine, whatever. The company. Again, I'm really trying to keep the scope narrow on all of this.
That's fair enough.
Yeah.
PJ gives $5 and says, "What if a board game you had to call an 800 number to get instructions for your next turn and they shut that phone number down?"
Big pardon.
Well, I'm only focused on video games, but even in that case, I would say I probably wouldn't be trying to do all this for something like that because, like I said, even in the petitions, I put playable state. Is the game playable? Then good enough. I mean, what that might mean could vary. It could be you do lose features along the way, but that's just completely different place than where we are now with this sort of thing.
Nine Seed gives $4.99 and says, been a fan of Second Wind and Ross Scott for a while now. Very happy this crossover finally happened. Rock on, you guys. Thank you, Nine Seed. Tsunami Dusha gives $20 and doesn't say anything, but thanks for the $20, Tsunami Dusha. And then Unnuclear gives $5 and says, if you never bought The Crew, check if you've ever got it in a Humble Bundle or another similar service.
Oh.
Yeah, I heard for Xbox, I don't even know how it works now. What, GWG, something gold? You might have gotten a free copy from that.
Games with gold?
Games with gold, maybe that's it.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Oof, I'd have to go check that.
Yeah, so you might be able to file a complaint. You're an owner. You know, so.
Yeah, I mean, I might have gotten a copy somewhere down the line. It's hard to recall all the shit that's on my Steam list.
Right.
I did buy The Crew 2. I don't think I ever played The Crew 1. I played The Crew 2. I reviewed it and didn't like it that much, if I recall. So if another petition comes along for The Crew 2, I'll get right on board with that.
I'm out by then. Whatever. Either it's solved or we failed. You know. It's,
And then Chris Fratz comes back with $5 and says, clarification. I consider a port/remaster version of a game that's updated but still using the original code. A port just keeping the old graphics. Well, are you saying we should mandate people do that, Chris Fratz? Because at the moment, that's just like if they feel like porting or remastering stuff.
No, I think it's more so just, do you feel that's preservation?
I guess. I mean, if it walks like preservation and quacks like preservation.
Could be a platypus.
I think that's close for me personally, close enough. But for remakes, if they're really changing things, I could see where that's not. But that's such a nuanced issue. For
Yeah,
I'm not even gonna worry about it.
That's fair.
like I found the re-releases of the first 3 Tomb Raider games fairly recently was. I found I was more interested in that than the full-on remake of Tomb Raider 1 that came out a while back. Anniversary,
Sure.
I want to say.
It's so tricky, and of course, just with general like gameplay updates and whatnot, you know, what is preservation?
I know. I mean, I think it's more fun to play the original and see how much we've learned since then.
right,
And
like
oh, good God, did we really put up with these controls in the
Yep.
original Tomb Raider game?
I'm nodding my head every time something bigoted comes through. My God, how racist we were.
Wow, everyone must have been stupid back then.
right, or even things like in the Dark Souls remaster, you know, like adding the bonfire near the skeleton blacksmith, right, where it's just like how changing is that to the original intent of
I know,
Dark
I mean,
Souls?
After a certain point, it's fucking George Lucas with his special editions of the original trilogy.
Exactly.
Listen, he gave you more. What could you ask for? To me, it was more like J.K. Rowling, who was just like, oh, yeah, no, I totally intended for these characters to be like this
Black
and that, and
stroke
this.
gay.
Yeah, exactly. It was like, I didn't pick up on that. No.
And Andy C gives $50 MX and says, nothing to add to the conversation. Just wanted to say it's nice to see Jack on camera. Thank you, Ross, for this campaign. I'm signing it now.
Oh,
Great.
good.
Good for you, Andy.
We did it.
And that's the last super chat. Unless some more pop in at the last moment, which they very often do. But for now, let's wrap things up. I was Yahtzee Croshaw. I was joined by Frost, by Jack, and thank you very much to our special guest, Ross Scott.
Yay!
From Accursed Farms and the Stop Killing Games petition. If you want games to not die, he's the person to talk to. That
Your
link
best
again,
chance.
stopkillinggames.com. See what you can do. All right, well, that's it for today's podcast. Just to plug the rest of our week's stuff, I've got my usual Fully Ramblematic video this week coming out on Wednesday. It'll be on the subject, it's a double bill this week. It's on Yellow Taxi Goes Vroom and Phantom Fury for a nice retro-styled indie game double bill. I'll have my Yahtzee Try stream on Wednesday as well. Frost, what do you got?
Just had a video going up talking about the tipping culture that Mike Ybarra would like to see in video games, and I go, "That's nice, honey. Let's not do that, though." I think it's important, very much as Ross Scott has done here, to offer a little friction on the slippery slope every now and again, so we don't slide too far down. So,
Absolutely.
That's it for me.
Jack, you got anything?
I don't have anything. I think Friday I'm streaming some Elden Ring, preparing for the DLC, and then working on getting all those Adventures Nigh remasters out. The originals will not be preserved. We're making them better.
Special editions. There you go.
Special editions. Absolutely.
And Ross, once again, thanks for coming. If you've got anything you wanted to plug besides Stop Killing Games, now's the time.
No, I'm like laser focused. So.
Great.
Well, I'll just say follow the Accursed Farms YouTube channel for all sorts of great content.
Normal videos will return as soon as I'm able. So.
Yes, don't put pressure on the poor boy. Look at him; he's been worn thin. All right. The last couple of super chats came in. Pure Pyro gives €2. Says request for more Foundry VTT videos with Jack and Omar.
If you guys want them, I'll tell you how I do everything in Foundry VTT for my Dungeons and Dragons games. It's very fun.
And one last super chat from Unnuclear, who gives $2 and says, "Is this the last super chat?" Yes, hopefully, because we're going to wrap things up right now before any more come in, like the cheeky little twats you are. All right. Thanks for watching.
Bye, everyone.
See you next time. Bye.